Dismantling Defenses and Excuses for Maintaining Cultural Biases with Sandra Collins. The work of challenging our cultural biases and assumptions is not easy because it requires us to look within ourselves with honesty and openness. But once we get past the barriers that we've built up within ourselves, it can be incredibly freeing, allowing us to move more deeply into our own learning and unlearning. None of us come to the practice of health and healing as blank slates. That's an outdated psychological concept that is neither helpful or realistic. In the process of decolonizing health, healing, and care, we invite you to bring your whole selves into the process. And to be prepared to lean into ethical space with your clients requires you to be willing to peel back the layers of gunk that we all build up over time because of our immersion in systems and ideologies of coloniality and racism and sexism and so on. Talking about defenses and excuses is important because they can be barriers to our learning and unlearning. We all have them. And if we don't pay attention to them, we can find ourselves in positions where they surprise us. So, getting to know ourselves is important. And being aware of our own vulnerabilities is a good place to start. I have a blame button. And if that blame button gets pushed, either directly or indirectly, I can end up in a reactive space. And if I don't pause and pay attention, then I find myself with my back up. Pause for a moment to consider that metaphor. My back goes up. I imagine a cat moving into a defensive position, arching its back with its hairs standing up straight. There is nothing invitational or open or self-reflective about that stance. The cat could justifiably be moving into fight or flight mode, or it could simply be mistaking a cucumber for a snake. We all hold different vulnerabilities based on our lived experiences that can lead to defenses and excuses when we're called in to attend to our attitudes and behaviors. My spouse Glow has a bossy button. She can give me instructions all day long and I just do what she says. But if I give her instructions, her bossy button can get pushed. Maybe I am being bossy. Or maybe she's feeling vulnerable in some way, and her vulnerabilities are closer to the surface. The point is that our vulnerabilities are learned behaviors that require humility and self-reflection. And they often have nothing at all to do with the person who invites us intentionally or unintentionally into attending to them. So, what are your relational sore spots, and how might they support or reflect the excuses and defenses that you tend to engage in? To lean into ethical space with our clients and our colleagues, we need to be willing to shine the light on our defenses and excuses. Otherwise, they become barriers to dismantling the assumptions and biases we hold that can cause harm in our relationships and can reinforce the ideologies of oppression. Let's look at a few examples together. Globalizing. If I mess up, then all is lost. Globalizing could be a problem for someone like me who has a blame button. Writing this book has required me to consider deeply and honestly criticisms of my earlier work by racialized learners who rightly pointed to gaps related to their learning needs. If I allow my blame button to flare and globalize this feedback to discount all that I have done, I'm at risk of becoming immobilized and retreating in shame. Instead, it is important to pause, reflect, process feelings, apologize for the harm done, and lean into the opportunity for growth, learning, and unlearning. In counseling, globalizing might be evidenced by reactively offering to refer a client to another therapist after they provide you with feedback on your inappropriate use of pronouns. In interactions with colleagues, globalizing can result in withdrawal from difficult conversations when you're invited to reflect on a bias or assumption. Deflecting responsibility. There are experts who say, dot, dot, dot. We live in a world of disinformation. If you want to support a particular bias, stereotype, or prejudice, there is an abundance of so-called expert advice. You might also be able to point to institutional or organizational policies and practices that reflect the systems of oppression in which we all operate. Or you can engage in critical reflection by asking yourself, what is the underlying purpose of this disinformation? Taking responsibility for critical analysis of the inputs to your thinking will help ensure that the outputs prepare you for culturally safer engagement with your clients. For example, you might buy into the claims that there are only two genders without considering critically the intent of erasure of diversity and preservation of the patriarchy. In the context of therapy, misguided beliefs can slip out in statements like, kids generally do better when they grow up in conventional families. Personalizing. I am not racist. I am not classist. Connecting racism or other isms to flaws in personal character makes it difficult to respond with cultural humility and openness to our own biases and assumptions. As a white person in a white-centered social, educational, and professional environment, I accept that uprooting coloniality and racism in my thinking, doing, and being is part of a lifelong journey. It is useful to differentiate between calling in opportunities for self-reflection on our inherited and unearned privilege, which may relate to us being white, male, cisgender, able-bodied, Christian, middle class, or middle-aged, and calling out the structural systems and ideologies of oppression and our responsibility to disrupt them. It is astounding to me how many academics feel the need to defend educational and healthcare institutions as if recognizing systemic racism, ableism, or sexism is a personal affront as opposed to a call for solidarity. In counseling practice, we may need to be prepared to hold the space for clients to express their justifiable rage at systems of oppression that we might represent as therapists. This requires us to own our positionalities and to respond with compassion and humility when anger is directed toward us. Masking prejudice. You look great with your weight loss. This is sometimes referred to as ambivalent or aversive racism, sexism, ageism, and so on, because we hide behind language that sounds positive. Most of us hold both positive and negative biases towards certain people based on their cultural identities. Aversive prejudice allows us to continue to feel good about ourselves while enacting oppression in subtle ways through mixed messaging. When we nurture rather than dismantle these clusters of attitudes and beliefs, we continue to mask our biases from ourselves, yet they cause harm to those we walk alongside. For example, saying to a client, "I'm impressed with how well you speak English," disguises prejudice in a compliment. Likewise, the statement, "Most Indigenous youth I work with have not had the privilege of consistent parenting," is backhanded stereotyping. Cultural erasure. I treat everyone the same way. Cultural erasure is a reflection of the assertion that we do not see color, gender, religion, or other cultural differences. Dr. Lisa Gunderson refers to the denial of race as color erasure or color evasiveness, a strategy that serves to silence dialogues about race. This defense mechanism creates a culture in which raising issues related to race, gender, ability, social class is itself deemed racist or oppressive. Asserting that we are human beings interacting with other human beings can send a message to clients that their specific cultural standpoints and their lived experiences of religious intolerance, classism, ageism, and so on will not be validated. For example, you might say to a client, I know that we don't share religious perspectives, but let's focus on what we do have in common. In doing so, you risk shutting down dialogue about their lived experiences. Or in peer supervision, you might ask, I'm having trouble getting my client to understand that most people see them for who they are, not as a person who is blind. Any suggestions for how I might shift their self talk? In this case, the denial of systemic and interpersonal ableism can have the effect of dismissing and pathologizing the client's experiences. Reverse discrimination. I am the one who is being discriminated against. Reverse racism, for example, is a misnomer that is used when white people claim they are now the oppressed group. This also applies to people who hold other forms of cultural privilege and who push back against initiatives to enact justice, accessibility, inclusion, diversity, and equity. Any adjustment to the distribution of power and privilege is seen as a threat, and this results in attempts to maintain power and control. In reality, the relative social locations of these individuals has not changed. Instead, they can experience a context-specific loss of unearned privilege. This might be unsettling, but it should not be misconstrued as an adjustment to their overall position within sociocultural hierarchies. So, when we hear men, for example, say they no longer have a voice or they are being sidelined, it is important to put this into context. It may be uncomfortable to not be permitted to take up all the space in the room, but you still have the majority of seats at the table. You might recognize this defense mechanism in statements such as, the criteria for this job must be based on academic and professional accomplishments, not identity politics. I'm now part of a disappearing breed. This reflects the ideology of meritocracy. Another example, I feel like we're spending most of our time focused on the needs of the few. This is not relevant to most of the clients with whom I will likely work. In this case, the ideology of coloniality. Gaslighting. You're overreacting. You see everything as sexism. Gaslighting can be particularly harmful because it undermines the realities of people facing various forms of discrimination. Just because you cannot or choose not to see it, it doesn't mean it is not there. I can speak from my own experience here. As I have continued to raise my critical consciousness of colonialism and racism, I see examples almost everywhere I look. It's not just that these ideologies are now more openly expressed, although that is unfortunately also true. Rather, I have trained myself to listen, observe, and reflect more carefully and critically. Sometimes gaslighting is overt and calculated to discredit and undermine people raising concerns about cultural oppression. I have seen this with colleagues who have filed harassment complaints and then been treated as if they have imagined discrimination. At other times, gaslighting is more subtle, yet distressing for the receiver. Listen for the potential harm to clients in these statements, for example. I'm sorry you felt offended by that statement. What I actually meant was, dot, dot, dot. This is an example of victim blaming. Or, I wonder if your boss simply forgot your prayer schedule when they announced their plan to standardize break times. In this case, we're talking about solidarity with privileged positioning. There are many more defenses and excuses that get in the way of us being able to build culturally responsive and socially just relationships with our clients and with each other. Healthcare spaces should be brave spaces where practitioners are willing to take up the call to cultural courage by looking within ourselves and dismantling the assumptions and biases that we hold as a platform for preparing ourselves to challenge systemic oppression in all forms. I invite you to move beyond performative allyship. which is essentially doing whatever it is we have to do to avoid being accused of prejudice and discrimination, mostly to feel good about ourselves. Instead, let's choose to lean together into the difficult and challenging and rewarding work of uncovering our own biases and assumptions so that we can create safer relational spaces for those we walk alongside. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video.